a note about how things are kind of gonna work, a disclaimer, if you will. First off, if you could just keep yourself muted, we're gonna be a lot of people in this single Zoom, and you know, background noise can be a little distracting for other participants. Please feel free to utilize the chat at any time. Put your questions in there. If you see a question come up that you feel you have an answer to, feel free to kind of chat with, you know, your fellow people and all of that. A few disclaimers. This is intended really to highlight not the Return to School Committee plan as a whole, but specifically the subcommittee for curriculum and instruction. So the main audience of this webinar really is teachers, paraprofessionals. You know, there might be things that are relevant to counselors and other staff as well, but that is the primary audience of this. A couple notes about things we will and will not talk about as well. Unfortunately, at this time, there's no definitive grading information. The grading committee, subcommittee of the Return to School Committee is separate from the curriculum and instruction side. Though it has a lot of overlapping members and teacher representatives. We are only just had our second meeting yesterday. One thing I can assure you of is I know one of the big concerns about grades during the spring was that we utilized the grade floor. So, you know, what students had gotten in the second progress report, their grade could not go lower. Because this is a new school year and an entirely new semester, the grade floor will not be a part of the consideration. This is more distance learning and not a reaction to a crisis, although we are still very much in a crisis. And so that will not be a part of the consideration. Students will have to, you know, start with a blank grade book and work up to earning their grades. So that's one update I can give you. As far as anything else definitive, unfortunately, I cannot at this time. We are hoping to make a final decision on Wednesday of next week, so there'll be more information there. So I know that there's a lot of apprehension, and I understand why, but we're hoping to give you as much time as possible by letting you know what's going on with that next week. And I think with that, we're ready to just kind of get going. So there's not really a formal presentation. What I'm going to do to kind of show you what the committee was able to come up with is take you on a tour of this website. This website is linked on our Jefferson Union District website. It's also in my email signature. I'm trying to find just as many places as possible I can put it so it's easy to access, but this is the URL up here, and consider bookmarking it so that you can go back and play around. And I'm going to highlight a few of the things that are available for you to do so. So before I get started in showing you any specifics, I really would be remiss if I didn't highlight the following people. David Gold from Jefferson High School, Lisa Rubin from Jefferson High School, Christian Ashford, who works up at the district office as our district instructional coach, Leah Anderson from Oceana, Marlene Gutierrez from Terra Nova, Joel Bruxford from Jefferson High School, Graham Cruikshanks from Oceana, Rebecca Earnholt from Oceana, Kirk Sands from Thornton High School, as well as two students, Natalie Law, who's a student at Westmore, and Irene Fernandez, who is a student at Jefferson High School. They were all a part of this subcommittee and contributed greatly. And so I just really appreciate it, their hard work, and the hard work of a lot of our teacher leaders, teachers, TOSAs, everyone that they've put in to help us form some resources for this. So thank you. So to start us off, this is the website, and we kind of have it broken down into some of our recommendations, webcasts, resources, and scope and sequence. So I want to dive into the recommendations first. So when we were tasked with forming the curriculum and instruction subgroup, we had these headings given to us that we had to sort of address what synchronous lesson design was going to look like, what asynchronous lesson design was going to look like, what interventions and supports there would be. And so we have a template for each one of these where we essentially have a recommendation for various aspects of that heading, and then resources for teachers. Lisa Rubin compiled there's a lot of different documents and a lot of recommendations. So she graciously compiled into this beautiful document 8 considerations when designing curriculum and instruction that really give you a good overview of some of the most important aspects of the recommendations that we have so far. And for not every single one of these headings, but for a lot of these headings, if you click on them, they actually take you to additional resources. And nothing here will be too unfamiliar to you, but they are, you know, time and time again in our research and looking at what we were going to do, things that are really important to leverage right now in online instruction. Having those really clear learning goals, varying your assessments, you know, what that's going to look like. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that in a moment. Feedback being huge, and especially more than ever, because you're not seeing students on a daily basis, having it be timely feedback when they're turning things in, even if it's something really simple, just like nice or good job, just some kind of acknowledgement, really important, as is building community, same as when we're in-person instruction, leveraging small groups, especially during synchronous learning. Making sure we're still providing those academic access points for our EL and LTELs and our students with IEPs. And then of course, checking for understanding, creative active learning, all of that good stuff. So what does this exactly look like then? So to me, it makes sense to jump into one of our first areas. Now that we know that we will be 100% online learning for fall, we will be really utilizing a lot of that synchronous lesson time. And so there's a couple of things to highlight here. So using those digital tools to kind of replace that lesson structure, you know, what does this exactly look like to design a lesson and give that structure in a synchronous environment? And so last spring, Kristen Ashford and Denise Shreve worked on this online teaching model, which was produced by us. Now, the times are really flexible here. You know, a lot of us are going to be, you know, in classes for 75 minutes, depending on how your schedule looks. That's actually one thing that I want to note that I also know we're going to get some questions about. Since we decided to go 100% distance learning for the fall, a lot of sites have started questioning, well, we had broken the students up into cohorts, and do we really need to do that now? Because the cohort was originally designed to lower the numbers of students that we were seeing, knowing that we would occasionally see them in person or they'd be going to campus. So that's no longer a concern now, although I will say something I observed from the spring was that having a large number of students on a Zoom call was challenging to, you know, have good relationship building and interaction. I mean, it can be done, but it's just a little bit more challenging. So the district's position on that is that that's really up to the sites. I know Jefferson has already kind of adjusted their schedule a little bit to maximize seeing students in synchronous sessions, but also keeping them in a cohort structure. And so, you know, that's just something to kind of consider. The big consideration with that too is just making sure whatever is decided, it's clear and it doesn't change too much, because this can be just confusing. We need students to know when they can log in and when they can expect to see their teachers for synchronous instruction and office hours. So as you've had a chance, as it's been pulled up, to look at the online teaching model, you can see that it doesn't extremely differ from what it looked like in-person format. You know, when you're delivering content and checking for understanding, these are kind of grouped together as they are because, you know, it's intended to go back and forth between that. You know, usually you use like a 10-2, you know, 10 minutes of instruction, 2 minutes to give students to kind of internally process, and 2 minutes to kind of orally process what they've heard. When we go into this too, another one that I really like that's linked in here is the 5 E's instructional model. So I know that that type is very, very tiny, so I'm going to pull it up here. This is something where it gives you a lens of how you can kind of structure synchronous through engaging students first, allowing them some opportunities to explore, allowing yourself to have some time to explain, to model, to elaborate, and then to do some kind of evaluation, probably a very low stakes evaluation, you know, exit tickets, checking for understanding that way. Then when we go back out to synchronous, really just one last note about synchronous, because you can explore this on your own is to, if I can just remind everybody to mute themselves, please, just the background noise can be a little distracting. The last thing to kind of utilize here in synchronous is synchronous isn't really probably the best use of our time to do a demo or to give a lecture. Really, the best use of our instructional time when we have the students live synchronously is to try to get them to interact with each other, get them to collaborate with each other, really to utilize those breakout rooms and getting them talking and engaged, because a lot of the content that you would normally have them absorb through your lectures, through your demos, through those kinds of means, can now probably make up the good amount of your asynchronous lesson design. And so there's a few things I also want to highlight on here. So as a part of the instructional minutes and models that we've adopted for this next fall semester, you know, to make those 240 minutes happen, students need to be also working asynchronously, independently on their own. So one really easy way to do this, and there's a lot of examples here. I'm going to show you one for ELD. This was actually done by Sanger Unified here in California, and I love it. And I'm a big believer in borrowing things from somebody else that they have created that's beautiful and wonderful. But you can see that this actually assigns activities for students to engage in on more of a weekly basis than a daily basis, which is highly recommended for asynchronous instruction because students going in and having to check a new assignment every day can kind of be a lot to keep up with. So this assigns things by the week, and it actually gives them a little bit of choice and even different levels of technology. Like some of these are a little bit more high tech, some of these are a little bit more low tech for students to engage in and work with, and they get to have a little bit of choice in what they're able to do to demonstrate that they got a particular concept. It would be really daunting, I won't lie, to have to create your own choice board week by week, but we have found that a lot of them, we've found a lot of them online that teachers are putting them out there and sharing, which is always great. So the other piece of this that I want to show off, and there's a couple different examples that we have in doing here, but Lisa Rubin created this for her AP Lit class, so that's an example of it. But this would be something that she would post in her Google Classroom at the very start of the week. And what I love about this is that it gives you a sense of what they're going to be doing synchronously and what students can expect, agenda, the Zoom link for her office hours that week, and then links to this asynchronous assignment. So it's just a one-stop shop for all teachers to be, or all students to be able to look at what the teacher has planned for that week. There's a bunch of different ways to make this look. Another one that's on here that you can check out is Roisin Madden from Oceana used this in the spring, and you can get a sense of how she utilized a weekly post to organize the resources that students were going to be taking a look at and how to kind of make that happen. So really good resources in here if you just are like me, and one of the big things that is a challenge for you is just kind of figuring out organization and delivering information to students. So the last thing I want to kind of look at in this section, because you can of course feel free to explore all of this on your own, is curriculum and assessment. And this is going to tie into another thing that I highlight in just a moment. But really, there's a need in this new environment when we are going to be seeing face-to-face our students a lot less. And we are going to be, you know, asking them to work independently a little bit more. And that can sometimes be a challenge, especially if students are working with information that's newer to them. That we really, this is the time to look at our standards and determine what's really essential. And so the scope and sequence teams across the district have been working on that. Social science just started with their scope and sequence work, well, started continuing their scope and sequence work, and they're already doing that with they already have a lens on, you know, what is super critical, what is important. English, math, ELD, science, they've all been engaged in those kinds of conversations, and I'll show you some of that work in a minute, but that's just really crucial in all of this. It is going to be a lot harder to do all of our assessments the way that we might have previously done assessments. So There's been some questions about lockdown browsers. We do have access to a lockdown browser. It's through a company called LineWise, formerly called Family Zone. And we are hoping to offer some kind of training PD on that as soon as possible, that we can with the company, but there are some caveats. It really only works best with Chrome. If it is something, if a student has a Windows machine at home, they would have to download and install, and it is software that can kind of control their computer, because a lockdown browser limits their ability to open up other windows or even additional browsers. So it's a little tricky. It would be a lot easier in an environment where all the students were on district managed Chromebooks to be able to do it. It also still doesn't stop students just having a lockdown browser from being able to access their phone or other kinds of devices. So knowing that that's going to be a challenge. Oh, and just an FYI too, if again students are using Chrome, even Google Forms has a feature where you can use the lockdown, but again, it depends on the use of a Chrome browser. So it's going to be a good time to kind of relook at our assessment and just figure out some tweaks that we can make. I know I've heard some teachers who are just planning on doing more quote unquote open book style assessments, like you would do if you had students, do open book, open note, whatever, having students maybe giving less problems in a particular assessment, and then providing something next to it that you ask students to explain their process, because it would be quite telling if they are not able to actually explain the process on how they arrived at the answer of the related question. There's a lot of different ways to kind of get a little bit creative with it, and I think that is something that we'll have to kind of consider. So here are just some low stakes formative assessment tools that are out there that can be played with, and then also some ideas for summative assessments using projects, using portfolios, things that go a little bit more than just stuff that can be Googled easily, because it is going to be an issue in the upcoming year. So there's a lot more recommendations like this, but some of these are, related to science teachers, visual and performing arts, career, technical education. Block lesson design was actually put in here when we thought we might be returning to in-person. So that one's a little bit less relevant now, but feel free to explore all of those on your own. Webcasts. So this is a place that I have started to put all of the screencasts that I developed last spring, and that I had Miss Rubin help me with the Syncing Google Classroom and Synergy webcast, and Miss Ashford helped me with the Edpuzzle one. We'll be adding to these as things go by, but I wanted to highlight a new thing that I added fairly recently, and this is tutorials for students. If you're taken to this particular page, clicking here will take you to a YouTube playlist. So when you click, it actually looks like this, and it's a whole folder of videos. And actually, I spent some time the other day finding some videos in other languages as well. And it has just basic things: how to use your phone as a scanner, how to get your inbox under control, how to manage files on a Chromebook, how to forward your email. I even found a student view tutorial that I threw in there. So it's something to kind of explore, and what I thought the intended use could be is some teachers had provided feedback that there was confusion among students on how to use particular tech issues and devices. We're hoping to put this playlist somewhere on the website for students to find, but also for some of them, consider posting them on your Google Classroom so that students can access and share with them. I also have one that I am adding videos to that's for parents, and I'm trying to find it in multiple languages, because they'll naturally have to navigate a lot of these things now themselves. So I just wanted you to make you aware that that's something that's available. And this has 17 videos in it now. I can add videos to it very easily. If you find any video that you think would be useful for this playlist anywhere on YouTube, feel free to send it my way, and I can add it to the playlist really easily. The next thing I want to highlight under resources, this one is, I think I'm going to go to the boring one first. The boring one, I only say is boring just because it will tell you everything that a lot of you probably already realize. You took a survey in spring about how you would most like to have your tech PD, what you would like it to look like, how confident you felt, and what form you would like it to be in. So this was the answer to the question of how confident people feel in using technology, and it was really great to see a lot of people feel very confident. This was some feedback on particular aspects that you wanted to learn more about. And then the last part that's really telling as well is the preferred method to access the learning. Screencasts are far and away the most popular for this, and so that's why we'll continue to produce a lot of these. But second place was live webinar small groups. So I shared this with the instructional coaches, and hopefully soon, if you saw an email, we'll be increasing the site techs at each one of the sites. And so they'll really help us to work on getting you access to any kind of training or support you need with some of these things at the site level. Because it's a little less preferred to have like a live webinar like this to actually learn like a new tool, and then office hours are just okay. So that's there. You can take a look at that. This is one that I think is going to be of a lot of interest to folks. So this is a form that we are asking that you fill out if you would like us at the district office to consider request of purchase for software tech subscriptions for 2021. So we've gotten a few, and we're trying to kind of put them all in one place so that we can consider each one of them. So please fill this out. We do have some funds to work with in getting some licenses that would likely be able to use next year. Just a couple word of caution. The thing that's really challenging about software and tech subscriptions is that it's not a one-time cost. It's an ongoing cost. And so that's what's challenging about it. Like being able to say, yes, we have the funds for it right now. But as I'm sure you've been hearing, you know, the economy is fairly unstable right now, and knowing where we're going to be in a few years is a little bit hazy right now. So that's what's tricky about it. But we also want to make sure people have access to the tools that they need. And especially if it's a tool that we're recommending, which is what this particular area is. Like anything in here, I feel like if we're recommending it, you know, we should consider supporting it with, you know, licenses and software subscriptions. So the last thing that I want to highlight here is the scope and sequences for at least these three, because I had access to these websites, are here. Just to look at English by example, you'll notice when you go in, and this is the same with math as well, there will be a banner at the top of the website because the sites have been updated to reflect the needs of distance learning. So a team of teachers, very grateful to all those teachers that came together either right before we got out of school, I think with the math teachers, and then a week in the summer for the English teachers and ELD teachers, took some time to look through already like the standards that we said were essential, and they even determined which ones were more essential. So we call this the need to know skills. And so for each grade level now by unit, these have been kind of pared down to, okay, we know all of this stuff is important. We know we want students to be able to, you know, endure this understanding, have this enduring understanding. But let's be honest, what are the things they absolutely need to know? And what are the things that might just be more nice to know? And with the nice to know things, to say essentially, if you get to it, or if you have time to create an extension activity, great. If not, we can let things go. Especially just for next year, knowing that we're under these kind of very different circumstances. So that's there for English, that's there for math, that's there for ELD. I think science has done some work. I'm hoping to add that up here, and as we kind of keep moving with the social science one as well. And world language can also get me some of those resources, and I can post it or at least give you a sense of where you can go and find that. So with all of that, I wanted to kind of just take you on a tour, talk a lot at you for a second before I answered any questions. So that concludes kind of that part of things. So I'm going to go over to the questions, which there seems to be a lot of them, or at least as I'm looking at the chat and I'm scrolling, I'm just gonna go through. So this might just be awkward as I take a minute. So Kareen's answered some questions.
Ms. Robinson, can you talk to them about August 12th? What
Yeah.
that would look like?
So I think the week of the 10th through the 14th went out in Dr. Deloria's communication, was it yesterday or the day before, that we have done some rearranging in what students will be focused on that day, because our first start day to meet our 180 days is technically supposed to start on August 10th. But that's really soon, and there's a lot of learning and collaboration and planning that we wanted to support teachers with. So we're trying to make things work for that week. The 12th is the only day of that entire week that the district will be offering professional development sessions. I believe right now we have the blended learning, I call her the blended learning lady, Marsha, yeah, who will be offering a few sessions on kind of the basic of setting up your online classroom, and then a session, like I think an 8 a.m. session and a 1 p.m. session on engagement tools for online learning. There's going to be a few things offered by Circle Up. And I know I'm going to be hosting one on looking at a syllabus with a critical equity lens. And so there'll just be a whole menu of things, and teachers will be able to sign up for what speaks to them during that day. Kareen, when do you think you'll be able to get that menu and out to them?
So I'm hoping that early next week, Monday, Tuesday, the latest, I will share a sign up for those PD sessions, because some of them overlap and you'll have to choose at least 2 of the sessions to attend. I am working with Synergy right now, and there will probably be a workshop on Synergy assessment as well, also Nearpod and the Remind app.
Awesome. I'm seeing some questions about Pear Deck. Pear Deck is free. There are things on Pear Deck that you have to pay for, but just for those of you who don't know, unless somebody has something that I don't know, I've done some research and read a few blogs. Pear Deck and Nearpod are nearly identical. They do a lot of similar things, and we do have a subscription to Nearpod that we will have for the foreseeable future. Why we went with Nearpod, just to give the rationale, is it was actually something we were planning on investing in prior to COVID, because we were already working on a one-to-one take-home program with Chromebooks, and then Jake and I got surprised, the plan's thrown out the window because now everybody's one-to-one take-home, and we were trying to be intentional about it, saying students had to go through certain digital citizenship lessons before they took a device home, and those Nearpod offers Common Sense Media's digital citizenship lessons as a part of their program, which Common Sense Media is awesome if you haven't checked it out. And so what's nice is that Nearpod offers both that bank of lessons, which includes the digital citizenship lessons, and then it also allows you to, with an extension that's already logged into all of our computers, district managed computers, create your own Nearpod lessons through Google Slides. So that is one thing. So I'm seeing some ideas just being shared. So there's a question about, I'm seeing a question about—
Ms. Robinson, can you please share where the teachers would be able to find the list of tech tools that we have curated?
So I'm seeing in one of the questions I saw, what have we paid for? So this is the one part of the page that says recommended tech platforms. And I do want to just give a caveat that some of these we haven't paid for because some of these we don't have to. So Nearpods we've paid for. Edpuzzle allows you to have 20 videos free with a basic account. I've heard from a couple of teachers that they've already run out of videos. So I would hope will, I mean, I already have it down on a list, but that would be a great thing to put in the request for tech and software subscription thing when you're coming up with that. Flipgrid is free. Quizlet has pro features, but it has a lot of the features for free. I've used a free account in my classroom for years. Similar story with Kahoot. Similar thing with Padlet. Padlet just limits the number of pads you have access to. And it is cool and different than Jamboard, but I do just want to give a really quick shout out to Jamboard. Jamboard's pretty awesome, and you can do a lot of similar things with it. And it is free because it's a part of the Google Suite, which we already have access to. And then Remind, we do have district paid accounts for Remind to be able to communicate with teachers and students. This isn't even an exhaustive list. It's just some things that we have put up here. Luis is asking if students have helped us. They do. That should be going out on some kind of communication. There's a specific email address and phone number that students should be able to get, but Karine already answered that question. Yeah, we don't have currently a Padlet subscription, so if that's something that you want to request, I would use the request link right there. Martine's asking about connecting all teachers to, or asking all teachers to sync Google Classroom to Synergy. I think that that is an extremely good idea. I have heard some complaints that teachers felt that their grade books started working very, very slow when they connected it to Synergy. Ms. Baca told me that there was an update made in Google Classroom that Synergy wasn't ready for, and so Synergy was slowing it down. You have to remember that these, since they're third-party applications for us, they're not always on the same sync and the same wavelength when they do their updates, so sometimes it takes one a minute to catch up to the other. But if it's still a problem, I believe, and Lisa is more of an authority on this than I am, but you can use the feature to sync Google Classroom to Synergy, and then you can unlink it, but your students should all be rostered in. That's really the key part, is that when you connect Google Classroom to Synergy, it automatically puts the students in your classroom as opposed to having to give them the join code and using it that way, because that can be really hard, especially since you don't know your students. You haven't met them like you had the benefit of having last year. So I'm seeing when will our requirements for teaching this fall be communicated? I know that just like anything else, maybe Ms. Baca can provide more specific information about this, but I believe there'll be an MOU and that they're taking a look at that right now, and that'll be something discussed with HR and union representation.
And it will be communicated through your principals.
So I just want to highlight something Leah Anderson said, that if you refer your colleague to Edpuzzles, you automatically get 3 extra videos. We should all recommend each other. I fully, wholeheartedly believe in things like that. Lee Puller is asking about subscriptions to screencasting programs. We currently don't have subscriptions to either Screencastify or Screencast-O-Matic. Screencastify I essentially don't use and don't recommend often because their free limit time is 5 minutes. I will say, if you do have something that you want to communicate that is less than that, I look at my analytics on my YouTube video for how long people watch videos. People really rarely watch videos for a very long time. You're lucky to see them, you know, even stay for longer than a minute. So, I mean, Screencastify still could be good if you can, you know, say something quickly and kind of get to the point when you're demonstrating something. But overall, 5 minutes is a very short amount of time. Screencast-O-Matic allows 15 minutes, which I found to be sufficient for most of my needs. But when we were kind of talking about getting a subscription to either of those, the thing that we kind of learned is that you can really do the same thing by just recording your Google Meet or your Zoom and having your screen shared. And it essentially does the same thing to be able to demonstrate something through screen sharing. So, I mean, it's not a no. If people are interested in it, you should definitely submit a request through through the form. But that was why we had kind of chosen to hold off with that. Just kind of looking through some of the questions. Diane has asked about a trial for Sora, S-O-R-A, which is listed in the Google Suite. And will we have access to that throughout the school year? I'm not sure. I'd have to look into it. And the issue is that Google has started to get a little tricky, and they have divided even the teacher suite accounts into regular education suite and something they're now calling enterprise. And enterprise is an additional cost per student. That's actually kind of a significant cost. And so now they are starting to put some of their features into that higher tier, which means we would not have access, but I'm not sure because I haven't heard about Sora. So I would definitely pop it into the request for tech and software, and we can kind of take a look at it.
Lori, this is Jake.
Hi, Jake.
Hi. We actually do have Sora. I forgot.
Okay.
It was a while back, but we did get a subscription to it through like the Daly City library system or something. The librarians would know more than I do, but I know that I did help them set that up, so we should have that available.
Thanks, Jake. So now I'm seeing a comment that I think is very important from Annis Brock. Is there a resource to help figure out why teachers might use all the mini tech tools for engaging students? I struggle to figure out how to tell everything apart. That's a really, really valid point. That was why two things that we decided to do. One thing I'll just highlight here, under recommendations, we do have another thing, I didn't feature it, but we have teaching platforms and tech tools. And we broke them into at least just like 5 different categories and then listed a couple of these things. Because if you notice, one of the first recommendations that we actually have on here is to limit the number of platforms that you use, considering limiting that. Less is more. One of the areas of feedback that we heard from some teachers, particularly teachers or professionals that work with our students with IEPs, is that they felt extremely overwhelmed, which I think a lot of teachers also felt extremely overwhelmed by the sheer number of platforms used. It's great to find those that integrate with Google Classroom, since that'll be the platform that we'll be hosting most of these on. Things that talk to Google Classroom is great. Edpuzzle does, Remind actually does, Nearpod does. Yeah, a lot of these different tools will integrate with Google Classroom, and that at least kind of puts everything in one place and makes it a little less challenging. That reminds me, I'll link in this document, Kristen Ashford and a team of other people, I think Denise helped on this as well, actually created a spreadsheet and it's very detailed. It has all of these different tech platforms, a description, the URL, what they're used for, and it even checks to see what subject area that might be useful for. I've heard some feedback that the document itself is very bulky and hard to navigate, but I mean, if you're looking for, you know, a one-stop shop for information on things, it'd be really great to take a look at that. So I'll actually add that and link it into this website. So I've heard a couple of people say that they're interested in getting like Adobe Acrobat or some kind of PDF editing tool. That is one of the things that we've also heard requesting, so that's on the list. I'm not going to say anything definitive about somebody. If we haven't met with the company yet, gotten a quote and, you know, like gotten a contract and submitted it for board approval, I don't want to get anybody's hopes up by saying that it's yes, we'll get that, but it is definitely on our list of consideration right now. So I've got a question, does our district allow placing students in breakout rooms? So right now, Zoom is the only game in town that does breakout rooms. Google Meet announced that they'd be adding it, but they did not give a definitive date. And I believe they're also going to put it in that Google Enterprise level. And so we decided to go with Zoom. So Jake, maybe you can speak to this a little bit more about the licenses that we acquired for Zoom.
So we initially got 250 licenses, and I'm also working right now on the Synergy integration with Zoom. The next version of Synergy, which is 2021, the 2021 release, will include an integration in TeacherView where you'll be able to just instantly start a Zoom session with your whole class, or you can just start a Zoom session with one student. We haven't really seen how it looks yet other than the demo, but the Google for Education piece, they didn't really specify on a release date to have breakout rooms, and we didn't want to go that route without ensuring that we would have the tools that we think would work best for our teachers. We may switch out to that after this initial year if Google for Education can catch up. I think that's about it.
Thank you. So Graham's asking, when we sign into district subscribe services in site, do we always use our district Gmail username and password in every situation? I would actually say, unfortunately, no. When I rostered for Nearpod, they needed me to download a file from our end, a CSV file, to upload into their end. And the only way I was able to do that, because the only thing that I can download information files from is Synergy, and we don't have our @jeffersonunion.net address in Synergy. We just have the @juhsd.net in Synergy, unless I'm a fool and didn't know how to pull it otherwise. So I had to roster us with the juhsd.net. I know that that's kind of confusing, but I would also argue that having two emails is kind of confusing. But we kind of do our best to navigate. So Robin's asking about students legally not showing their face on Zooms. Do they have the legal right not to show their lovely faces? Yes and no. So the big thing with that is that a request has been made. If students are a part of a cohort that's supposed to attend a synchronous session, we should be recording and posting to Google Classroom so that students who had to miss for whatever reason can access it later. In those cases, if students had not signed a release to have their photo or their likeness shared, then they would have to I'm not sure exactly how it's been determined, like not show themselves, like block out their camera. I know Kareem said that they're working on something on our back end here in Synergy. So, the little icons, like things that indicate if a student has an IEP or if they're EL, that there would be an icon added to your class view screen to let you know that student did not have permissions for sharing webcam photos. Just a quick note on that, I think we need to be conscious that there are a lot of reasons why students don't like sharing their video. I mean, just to point it out right now, I can only see a few of the video, people at a time from the view I have, but there's quite a number of people right now that aren't sharing their video, and I think that there's a host of reasons. I'm not automatically assuming that, people aren't engaged or listening. I think it's just a different environment when we're kind of coming into people's homes. And into their personal spaces. And I think there's some good practices that you can use, utilizing backgrounds, things like that can help to make students feel more comfortable. But I think it's about making them feel like they feel safe to show and open up in those kinds of ways, because it's a tricky thing. So I'm seeing a question about, do we have clear discipline rules for behavior around the use of tech? Yes, there is the acceptable use policy that goes in the annual notifications, and students and their, Jake can maybe help me with this, and their parents, I believe, have to sign it. We also with, yeah, maybe Jake should even just take this one too, because I know we have a new filtration system too. Jake, can you say any more about that?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, this question was about clear discipline rules for behavior around the use of tech.
We just updated our student acceptable use policy, which has language in it for that. It went out to the acknowledgements that they have to sign a couple days ago.
So another question here is, what is our attendance policy? The subcommittee on attendance is still meeting to finalize things, but this is different than spring. There is an expectation that students attend, and we have to keep track of them because we also have to reach out to those students who aren't attending and aren't showing up and figure out what's going on. Because this is school. This is, you know, the real thing. You can kind of see last spring is the dress rehearsal, you know, this is opening night coming up here. So we have to consider those things. In addition to attendance, students also have to meet requirements for daily live interaction, which we're setting up as, you know, attending at least one synchronous session and engaging in asynchronous lessons or communicating with the teacher via reminder email. That's just for daily live interaction. That necessarily won't make attendance, but you know, there's also an expectation now in SB 98 that students, we account for them, that we have some interactions with them, that we know where they are. Sorry, it's just taking me a second to scroll through some of the questions. So there's a question in here about controlling student behavior in breakout rooms. I will have to kind of look into that and get back to you. You know, it's not something that I have a lot of resources readily available for. I know I got a question before about just even, you know, how to present information to students and have them still see like a teacher screen or something like that while they're on breakout rooms. And they will be kind of things that we'll have to sort of work around. So I'm going to make a note of that right now, and I'll get back to you on that one. All right. So somebody's asking if you'd have to sign a release, even though our Google Classroom is private to our district. You know, it would seemingly make sense that that would be the issue, only just that that was what we were told from County Council. So even though I agree it's private, I guess still, since it's being posted on something that multiple people have access to, that, you know, County Council is telling us to have an abundance of caution, perhaps. So somebody asked if we have a district account for Kahoot. No, just free accounts is what we have. So if there is a compelling reason for us to investigate pro accounts for Zoom, please fill out the form and we will look into it. So some people are saying that they can't use video in Zoom without the Chromebook crashing. Yeah, so I mean, that kind of stuff is really frustrating. I don't know if you have better luck on Meet. I still think that we should, you know, open it up so that people can use alternative forms if Zoom in particular is difficult. But I think some people find that just you know, turning off their camera works pretty well, and I've had to even do that myself in a few meetings. So I'm seeing a lot of comments about requesting the copy of the acceptable use policy. And so Corrine had answered that a little bit above, that she would be sending that out. So that will be sent out. So I'm seeing some questions also about, you know, a number of synchronous hours versus asynchronous hours. As I said in the beginning, some schedule things might be flopping around a bit, depending on your school site. Largely the cohort system, those schedules that we you know, decided upon. I know Jeff chose a slightly different one than the rest of the district, but those are kind of just being used in our distance learning. They were actually even developed with hoping that they would transition really well between distance learning and in-person learning. However, now that we know that we're going to be distance learning the whole semester, there might not be a need to have as divided up cohorts, but that would be kind of a decision we'd have to make. But what we need to essentially address is that it's 180 days and there should be 240 instructional minutes a day. So if that's happening synchronously, if that's happening asynchronously, that all needs to go into the consideration. So. And the last question I'm seeing here, can we put together a best practice for online meeting, Doc, for kids? There are those things. Lisa Rubin actually just shared one with me the other day. So we can definitely throw one of those things into these recommendations in a hyperlink. So it's kind of miraculous. It is about 5 minutes to 1. And okay, I'm getting a few more questions. So protocol for teacher absences and what do you do when you're absent? So I've been told this is, you know, something HR is, you know, deciding on and putting out the information about, but they will be asking you to still use Frontline, even if you're not requesting a sub, because Frontline isn't just a place where we can request a substitute, but it's a hub to just kind of track attendance and what's going on with days. Supposedly, we're trying to, I mean, this is really an HR question, so that's why I'm just being careful about what I say, because I don't want to kind of say the wrong thing. So Kareen can come in and correct me, but you know, we will probably use less substitutes this year than in previous years. That being said, I've been informed that it's not like that means there are no subs available. There is just some more flexibility with teachers if they'd like to add more asynchronous time, pre-record a lesson, invite one of their cohorts to another cohort session, just kind of playing around with those kinds of things instead of calling in a sub. Although, and Kareen can correct me if I'm wrong, the option to call in a sub is still an availability on a very limited case-by-case basis.
It will have to be a discussion with the principal and the teacher and decide if a sub is needed for that classroom. And so please speak with your principals.
So it is 12:55. We said we would only take an hour of your time. I'm seeing mostly, I don't know if I missed another question.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think a lot about all of you in all of this. You know I haven't been a teacher for a year and a half or so. Maybe I think I'm coming up on 2 years now. But the struggle is real, and I know it and I remember it, and I just have a lot of respect and faith in all of you, and I'm excited for this next year, as challenging as it is. You know, one of the quotes that I've been really hearing a lot is that we have to take advantage of every crisis, and I you know, I like that. Take advantage of a crisis, even though it's not always, I'd prefer just not to be in a crisis, you know, but it is what it is. So thank you so much for coming. And please reach out if you have any questions, and we will absolutely be updating this website with more information. So please check back. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori.
Hi, Tino, if you can hear me.
I can hear you talking.
How are you
Tino,
doing,
in the
Karin?
hallway.
Hello.
There we go. You unmuted yourself.
Thanks for a good meeting. Thank you.
Oh, anything for you, Tino.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Yes, see you in
Bye-bye.
a second.
Hi, Jean.
I'm free. See ya. Thank you, Lauren.